Life has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. For Mark, that curveball came wrapped in a series of late-night texts and hushed phone calls from his wife, Sarah. They had been together for a decade, building a life that, from the outside, looked perfect. A beautiful house, two wonderful kids, and what Mark believed was a rock-solid marriage. But lately, a shadow of doubt had started to creep in, chilling him to the bone. It started subtly. Sarah became more protective of her phone, a device that was suddenly always with her, even on trips to the bathroom. She started having work emergencies that required her to stay late, and her business trips became more frequent. Mark, a trusting man by nature, initially brushed it off. He was a busy architect, and he understood the demands of a career. He wanted to believe her, to trust the woman he had pledged his life to. But the signs were becoming impossible to ignore. The real turning point came one evening when Sarah was in the shower. Her phone, left on the nightstand, buzzed incessantly. A message flashed on the screen from a name he didn't recognize. "Can't stop thinking about last night." Mark's heart plummeted. It felt like the floor had opened up beneath him. He didn't pick up the phone. He didn't scroll through her messages. He just stared at that one sentence, and in that moment, the idyllic picture of his marriage shattered into a million pieces. He could have confronted her right then and there. He could have screamed, yelled, and demanded answers. The rage and betrayal burning inside him were immense. But as he stood there, his mind raced past the initial shock and landed on a cold, hard clarity. A confrontation would lead to lies, denials, and a messy, drawn-out fight. She would twist the narrative, maybe even blame him. He knew Sarah. He knew how she operated. And he realized that forcing the truth out of her wasn't the answer. The truth, he decided, had a power all its own. He just needed to let it do its work. So Mark did nothing. He said nothing. He went to bed that night, the space between him and Sarah feeling like a vast, cold canyon. The next morning, he made breakfast for the kids, kissed Sarah goodbye as she left for work, and acted as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Inside, Mark was a man on a mission. He wasn't seeking revenge in the traditional sense. He wasn't going to slash her tires or expose her on social media. His plan was far more subtle, and in its own way, far more devastating. He was simply going to remove himself from her safety net, piece by piece, and let her own actions create the consequences she so richly deserved. His first step was financial. Mark had always handled their finances, a joint effort built on mutual trust. He spent the next week meticulously separating their assets. He opened a new bank account and started redirecting his salary there. He consulted a lawyer not to file for divorce just yet, but to understand exactly what his rights were and how to protect himself and his children. He made copies of all their financial statements, mortgage documents, and investment portfolios. He was building an ark, preparing for the flood he knew was coming. All the while, he maintained his calm exterior. He was polite, even kind, but distant. The warmth was gone, replaced by a cool, professional courtesy. Sarah, wrapped up in her new affair, barely noticed at first. She was too high on the thrill of her secret life. She saw Mark's quietness as him being preoccupied with work, a convenient excuse that allowed her more freedom. She had no idea that the foundation of the life she took for granted was being systematically dismantled right under her nose. Mark played the part of the oblivious husband perfectly. He'd ask about her day, listen to her fabricated stories about work stress, and nod along, all while gathering the evidence he needed. The second phase of his plan involved their social life. Sarah loved being the perfect couple, the hosts of popular dinner parties, the center of their circle of friends. Mark started to quietly withdraw. When friends called to make plans, he'd politely decline, citing a heavy workload. When Sarah tried to organize a get-together, he'd have a prior commitment he couldn't break. He wasn't rude or obvious about it, but he was no longer her social partner. He was subtly isolating her, leaving her to be the sole performer in the theater of their happy marriage. Slowly, their friends started to notice. They'd ask Mark if everything was okay. He'd just smile and say he was tired, letting their imaginations fill in the blanks. He never once spoke a bad word about Sarah. He didn't have to. Sarah's own increasingly erratic behavior was doing that for him. She became more defensive, her stories about work more elaborate and less believable. Without Mark there to anchor her lies began to unravel at the edges. The breaking point came about 2 months later. Sarah had planned a weekend getaway, another business conference. On Friday afternoon, Mark received a call from a close friend, the husband of Sarah's best friend, Kate. "Hey Mark," he said, his voice hesitant. "This is a bit awkward, but Kate is really worried. She said Sarah's not on a business trip. She's in a cabin upstate with some guy." Kate saw her credit card statement by accident. Are you okay?" This was it. The moment of truth, delivered not by him, but by the carelessness of Sarah's own deception. Mark took a deep breath. "Thank you for telling me," he said calmly. "I've suspected for a while. I appreciate you looking out for me." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. The seed of truth had been planted in their social circle, and it was about to grow into a forest fire. That evening, with the kids at his parents' house, Mark packed. He didn't pack Sarah's things and throw them on the lawn. He packed his own. He took his clothes, his personal belongings, and the documents he had so carefully prepared. He wrote a simple, one-line note and left it on their perfectly made bed. It didn't say, "I know you're cheating." It just said, "I have gone to stay with my parents. My lawyer will be in contact." When Sarah returned on Sunday evening, tanned and glowing from her romantic weekend, she walked into a house that was eerily quiet. The children weren't there. She called for Mark, but only silence answered. It was then that she saw the note. The color drained from her face. Panic set in. She called Mark's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. She called his parents, who politely but firmly told her that Mark did not wish to speak with her. She called her friends, but the news had already spread like wildfire. Some didn't answer. Others, like her best friend Kate, were cold and distant, offering no comfort. In the span of a few hours, Sarah's world collapsed. She was alone in their big, empty house, a house she suddenly realized she couldn't afford on her own. Her affair, which had seemed so exciting and consequence-free, was now the very thing that had detonated her life. The man she was seeing, when she called him in a panic, suddenly became distant. He had a family of his own, and he had no intention of leaving them for her. She was just a thrill, a temporary escape. The days that followed were a blur of humiliating revelations for Sarah. The lawyer's letter arrived, detailing the separation of assets Mark had already put in motion. She discovered her access to their joint accounts was gone. She had to face the judgment in her friends' eyes, the disappointment from her own family, and the crushing reality that she had single-handedly destroyed everything she claimed to hold dear. Mark never had to raise his voice. He never had to confront her, accuse her, or fight with her. He simply stepped aside and let the truth run its natural, devastating course. He had protected his children, secured his future, and maintained his dignity. He understood that true power isn't about winning a fight. It's about knowing which battles aren't worth fighting. By refusing to engage in her drama, he allowed her own choices to be the ultimate judge and jury. The silence was his statement, and the truth was his victory. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content. We'd love to have you as part of our community. See you in the next video.